You can use your apex variables in SOQL queries using a colon, and these type of variables are called bind variables. This is very helpful as generally you store your data in a list or set or maybe in some other data type variable, and using these variables directly in a SOQL query makes your query short and easy to read. For example, I could have a set of account IDs where let's say there are like 100 plus account IDs that are stored in this set, and now I can directly use this set in my SOQL query using the colon. So this makes our SOQL query very short, as if you do not use bind variable, then you need to construct this SOQL query for those 100 plus accounts. And the other example is maybe like you can store a account name or lead name in a string variable, and then you can use that as well. Now there are some constraints about using binding variables in SOQL. So you can use this binding variable or bind expression in your where clause, and within your where clause you can use these in a equals to operator or not equals to operator. You can also use them in the in operator or not in operator as well. You can also use these binding variables with the limit keywords and the offset keywords as well. So now let's go back to our developer console and give it a try. So here in my developer console, I'm going to create a list of string where I'm going to store account names, and we are going to add few account names in this list. So let's copy these account names from our Salesforce org. We are going to use the add method from list class, and this should be a string. Let's copy this few more times and let's copy the remaining accounts. Now we can directly use this account names list in our SOQL query. So I'm going to write a query here which is going to return a list of account. Let's call it accounts, and I'm going to use my square braces. Let's write a simple SOQL query with ID, name and rating from account, where, let me put it in new line, where name in, and now we can use our account names list here, and to use it we need to use a colon and then the variable name. So this right here is called a bind variable that you can use directly within SOQL, and now you can retrieve the result and then print them in a debug statement. Let's execute this code and click on this debug only checkbox. So we have got all our 4 accounts. Now imagine if you don't use this account names bind variable, you would have to write each and every account name here within your SOQL query. So after your in operator, you would have to use parentheses, and within these parentheses you would define your account names. And this list could be a lot bigger. It could have more than 100 items, and if you define these names here within the SOQL query, your query will be too long and it will be very hard to read your SOQL query and to actually modify this later on. So just to show you how you would do it, I'm going to define 2 account names here, and then I'm going to execute this code, and this time we will retrieve 2 accounts as we have defined 2 account names there. So using these binding variables definitely makes our job easier while we are working with SOQL queries. Now you can use these bind variables inside the in operator, not in operator, in the equals to operator, not equals to operator, or in the limits clause or in the offset clause. But you cannot use bind variables to define your fields. For example, you cannot have a list of name and rating and define your binding variable here. Let's call it like fields binding variable. So this is not allowed. You have to define your fields and you can only use the bind variables after the where clause or in other clause like limit and offset. We'll be using these binding variables a lot in our further videos of this course, so make sure that you practice it a lot.